Anyone who has signed up, you are able to give your minutes to someone else if you would like to, up to the total of 9 minutes. Our first speaker is Mr. Don Schrader. And if you could be ready, Mr. Adam Killen is next, followed by Silvio Delangelo. Mr. Schrader, good evening.
Thank you. Have you each listened in depth, face to face, to at least one family whose loved one was beaten or murdered by police? Until you have, why be on this commission? How many of the police murders could have been prevented by police using non-deadly weapons to incapacitate a dangerous person? How many of the police murders could have been prevented by police taking cover and then negotiating with the person in tense situations, even for several hours if necessary? How many Albuquerque police were in war combat and suffer PTSD? How many police suffer PTSD from childhood trauma, their own childhoods, seeing their family members beat each other, and now, in a crisis, the lifelong rage explodes with a gun and a badge? Are most police beatings and murders committed by police suffering PTSD? Which U.S. cities, as large or larger than Albuquerque, have far less police beatings and shootings? What nonviolent methods do those cities use? Why are some cops here shooting people in 2 or 3 incidents within 5 years, while other cops go decades or their whole career never shooting anyone? How about giving public recognition to those cops who have never fired their gun for 20 years? Public recognition, especially to those cops who resolved a very dangerous situation without shooting anyone. If you had a mentally ill, very close loved one in a rage at your home, would you call the Albuquerque police, knowing that loved one could be shot and killed by the police?
Thank you, Mr. Schrader. Mr. Adam Killen. And just, I'm not sure if you're new to this process or not, a little ding will sound with 30 seconds to remain in your time.
I'm actually going to be donating all of my time to Mr. D'Angelo.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Delangelo, then, you are well acquainted with our process. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Schrader. Well said.
Can you hold just a second, let her set the clock? Okay.
You know, Carl Foster, you represent my District 8, and your complaint in the Journal damning Richard Schein for suggesting changes to the process for oversight was inexcusable. It was inexcusable. You know, when I served on the Albuquerque Citizens Team in the early 2000s, which oversaw HUD funding, we didn't sit on our hands. We saw a problem in the corruption in the housing rehabilitation program, and when we got stonewalled by the people in the city and the mayor, we wrote a 20-page investigative report that went right to the HUD secretary. Yet you sit there claiming none of these honest people, the good people, have a right to because of their expertise, to talk to the Task Oversight Commission. You're disgraceful. You know, you didn't get appointed to just serve Ms. Hammer and the internal affairs. You know, a cop who first saw you, you know, file that complaint against mayoral candidate, opponent Pete Canelli for ethics violation. You ignored the mayor taking money, which showed how hypocritical you were. But now you know you don't want to allow these commissioners to afford expertise. You know, if you think the POC ought to be eliminated, maybe you ought to leave. And maybe you ought to leave, because these honest people, at least 5 of them, are doing a good job despite the crummy ordinance that they're dealing with. You know, one cop, and I share information with cops, called you a stooge. A stooge. And with all your academic education, you know what that means. He calls you a stooge to the mayor, to the IRO Hammer, and to the chief. And you, Lieutenant Roseman, you stonewalled an IPA request and said, well, you can't release recordings of a shooting because that's not releasable. Well, are no recordings releasable? I've been waiting since 27th of July for the shooting of Vincent Wood. He was gunned in the back, an African American with post-traumatic stress disorder, and a fellow Vietnam vet, and Banks ignored it. And then we get this little secret investigation of your training officer, right? I know what it is. In fact, I sent a message to all of you today, just before I came here, about these extracurricular affairs that Mr. Wolf has been doing. You know that. That's no secret. You're a disgrace as well. You are. But you're no better than Banks and no worse than Banks. You know, as Don Schrader said, you know, we still have a history of shooting people. The bloodbath goes on, and we got as equally a corrupt police chief in Banks as we had in Schultz. You folks that sit and watch this garbage that's presented by Ms. Hammer to you every day and Lieutenant Roseman every day, you know what's wrong with the process. And I applaud Mr. Shine for taking the time to go to the POs, to the police task force. And you all should be doing it. I know you won't do it. And maybe you won't do it, Mr. Cameron, but the other 5 of you that are honest people will do it. And that's what we need. You know, we're fed up. We are fed up. You have 5 good people trying to do a good job. You have 1 obstructionist. And you, again, are disgraceful. You really are disgraceful. It's time to take a look in the mirror and see who you really are. Thank you.
And last, Mr. Charles Arasim.
Yes, I was hoping to speak directly to Mr. Du Bois tonight, but I see he isn't here for some reason. I have a real problem. I believe it was at the October meeting when I spoke. I asked him directly where the email address was that was part of my ACLU settlement with the city. And he gave me an answer of, we're working on it. So I waited a month. I came last month to the meeting, and I asked him the same question. And he told me that through you, Mr. Chairman, that it was on the website. And I thank you for taking a look during the break at that meeting last month and discovering that it wasn't on the website, just as I was saying. I'm very disturbed by this. Why a man of supposedly take an oath of ethics as an attorney would lie to me twice and use you, Chairman, to do it. I think you should be very upset. So I think you guys should take a good hard look at Mr. Du Bois and possibly ask the city attorney's office to replace him on the POC as far as your embedded attorney from the city's attorney's office. Thank you very much.
Okay, that completes our public comments. Yes, Jonathan Siegel, Commissioner Siegel, you have a question.
Thank you. As a follow-up, I wanted to let the speaker know that Mr. Du Bois' supervisor is here today acting in his behalf, so he will have heard your words at least. obliged to respond to you.
May I have his name, please?
That's Kevin Kern.
Kevin Turner?
Curran, C-U-R-R-A-N.
Kevin Kern? Thank you, Mr. Kern.
Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this is a correct place or not, but I received, I think maybe we all received a letter through our inbox, and I would like to ask the question. I wrote back to the person and said that I would find out, and the person said they were concerned and not feeling comfortable about testifying before us. Would this be an appropriate time to ask, on behalf of a member of the public, a question? It's one sentence long.
Ask a question of whom?
I suspect it will either be of city legal or of the IRO. It came to our public inbox.
Just a minute, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Just a moment, please. I'm going to say no, this is not the appropriate time for that. That this person does have the opportunity to email directly the IRO or the IRO. So let's move on. Let's see. So we have it's time for the review of the minutes. We have the minutes from the November meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to these minutes?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm going to abstain because I have to recall I left halfway through the meeting, so I'm going to have to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Any other corrections or additions? Yes, Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few corrections or additions to the minutes as follows. On the first page, we would note under item 3, a vote of only 6 of us, and Commissioner Shine is not listed. I believe he arrives after that vote, sometime during public comment. I was not paying close enough attention to know, but by the time item 5 comes up, he is voting. So at some point along there, I believe the minute should show an insertion of Commissioner Shine arrives late, approximately 4:05 p.m. That's the first of a few corrections. There is a notation later in the minutes about Commissioner Shine leaving.
Okay.
The next issue or correction I have is on page 5 under CPC 239-12. A motion was made to request my recusal, and the motion was made by Commissioner Foster. I believe it was seconded by Commissioner Peterson. I may have it wrong. That motion failed on a 1-to-6 vote. I believe a motion made and voted upon should be reflected in the meeting minutes. So I would request insertion of that motion unless others here see otherwise.
Okay.
On page 6, at CPC 088-13, we see that CPC came to a vote of 3-3. I would add a comment because it doesn't explain what happens on a tie vote, and in fact, this commission was not very clear about what should happen. I would recommend we insert language that would read words to the effect of, the chair ruled on advice of counsel that no further motion was in order, and the case would become a non-concurrence at the next public hearing.
Say that again. Say where that is again.
I would suggest we insert this language after the vote, which reads 4-3 and against 3.
Okay. Okay.
Next page, on page 7 at CPC 170-13, I recommend the same language be inserted. We have, again, a 3-3 tie. And we took the following action, and effectively it was done on same recommendation of council. Other than that, at item 8, it mentions here that Vice Chair Siegel discussed his review of the city attorney's legal opinion. Commissioner Varela also offered her opinions on the matter, and I would note that as well. I have no further corrections, would move these minutes per the recommendations for amendments that I just read out.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion about any of the amendments offered? And all those in favor of adopting the minutes as amended, please raise your right hand. It is unanimous. Did we get all those? Okay. Yes.
May I have the floor, Mr. Chair?
In just a moment. Let me just collect myself, find where I am here. Okay. So, Commissioner Shine has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as you know, I had to leave to catch a plane, leave the last meeting in November early in order to catch a plane. But since I got back from my trip, I did review the video of the meeting, and it was apparently some commissioners raised some question about my relationship and my activities with the POC task force. So in order to respond to the questions that were raised in my absence, I would like to read the following brief statement, which is a condensation of an email I sent to City Councilor Ken Sanchez, who is now President Ken Sanchez of the City Council.
May I interrupt you just a second? It was noted by one among us that this is not on the agenda. However, it does refer to comments made at our previous meeting. So as part of our review of this past month's meeting, that's why I agreed that this would be included. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Shine has the floor.
In my statement to the City Council read as follows. As a follow-up to our conversation Wednesday, I spoke to Mona Vincente. She is the Assistant New Mexico Attorney General who has drafted several Attorney General opinions interpreting the Open Meetings Act. The New Mexico Attorney General is assigned by the Open Meetings Act with the responsibility for enforcing the Act. She confirms that what I have been doing with the task force is not a violation of the Act. I, like any other citizen, at town hall meetings or otherwise, have a right to submit legislative proposals to the task force chair and ask them to distribute those proposals, which he did, to the other task force members. I, like the union president or any other citizen, have a right to meet with individual members of the task force to discuss my legislative proposals. Since I'm not a member of the task force, even if I met with every member of the task force, it would not be an Open Meetings Act violation because I'm not a member of the task force. That is, I am not a member of that public body. In a similar vein, I or the union president have a First Amendment right to meet privately with each and every member of the City Council, if they were willing to meet with us, to discuss any legislative business of mutual concern or interest without violating the Open Meetings Act. In fact, I have met privately and individually to discuss POC business with Councilors Trudy Jones, Don Harris, Ken Sanchez, and Isaac Benton. An Open Meetings Act violation would occur if a rolling quorum of the task force members or the City Council discussed my proposals in private, but that could happen whether or not I have met with any task force member or City Councilor based solely on the copies of my proposals that have been distributed to the task force. I have no reason to believe that any member of the task force or the City Council has violated the Open Meetings Act by creating a rolling quorum of private meetings on my proposals or on any other information or proposals that have been received from anyone else. There is no question of an Open Meetings Act violation at the Police Oversight Commission because, as I have made clear to the task force, these proposals are my personal recommendations based upon my 14 months experience on the POC. At the time that I sent the proposals to the task force chairman, I had not distributed or discussed them with anyone on or associated with the POC. Since I have submitted the proposals to the task force, I sent them to the IRO, Ms. Hammer, and suggested that as a courtesy to my colleagues on the commission, she distribute them to the other members of the commission. I have had a private conversation about the proposals with only one other commissioner who has not discussed them with any other commissioner, which is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act, since 5 commissioners would be required to have private discussions of the proposals to constitute a rolling quorum. Similarly, I have a right to attend any public task force meetings or meetings of its subcommittees, just as the IRO, Ms. Hammer, or her representative attends each of those meetings along with me and other interested members of the public, such as Mr. Arasim. I, like Mr. Arasim, Ms. Hammer, or anyone else who is present, have a right to share my views with the task force or a subcommittee of the task force whenever I'm recognized to speak by the chair of the meeting. Mr. Willoughby or any other union representative or any other POC commissioner has the same right to attend the meetings and participate as I and Ms. Hammer and Mr. Arasim do. The fact that those individuals are not willing to take the time and make the effort to do so is their responsibility, not mine. Finally, this task force is composed of dedicated people exercising their independent judgments and trying to do the right thing. Just as it is entirely appropriate for Ms. Hammer or her representative to attend each meeting to provide the task force with her experience, viewpoint, and recommendations as the IRO, it is also appropriate for me to attend and provide my different experience, viewpoint, and recommendations as a commissioner on the POC. Neither Mrs. Hammer nor I have any Svengali-like powers to improperly manipulate the independent thinking members of this task force. However, this task force should not be required to reach its conclusions in complete ignorance of the practical ways in which the current IRO and the current commission operate under the current ordinance. That's why I attend the meetings, and I believe why Ms. Hammer attends the meetings. We are both there as resources for the task force to share our experience on the current ordinance and make recommendations to the task force members, which the task force members are, of course, quite free to reject or accept. And there was a question raised about whether it was made clear to the task force that my proposals were my personal ones and had nothing to do with the commission. I would point out that on November 11th of this year, at my request, as I indicated in the statement I just read, Ms. Hammer forwarded my proposals to all the commission members, the POC commission members, POC members. And part of that email included my email to Chairman Lippman of the task force, which said, and it's very brief, I'll read it. Dear Chairman Lippman, please find attached my proposals for amending the Police Oversight Commission ordinance. I would appreciate it if you could forward this email and these legislative proposals to each member of the task force for his or her consideration. These proposals are based upon my experience over the last 14 months as a commissioner of the POC. However, these are my personal proposals. They have not yet been distributed or reviewed by my colleagues on the POC. They represent my personal recommendations only. Thus far, the commission as a body has not taken any position on any proposed amendments to the ordinance. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair?
There will be no response to Commissioner Shine. He was responding to comments made against him in his absence last meeting. If you have something else you would like to address.
Well, since Commissioner Shine has responded to the last meeting and opened it up, I would like to be able to present information at an open discussion next meeting.
Oh, whatever you know, next meeting is under consideration, so certainly.
No, he opened it up, and I'd like to present documentation showing that.
I'm saying next meeting.
Okay?
Let's move on. Let's go to citizen appeals. We have 3 appeals before us this evening. The first appeal that we will address, well, Mr. Arasim, do you want to do both of yours at the same time, or do you want to break it up?
I prefer to have them separate. They
Separate.
are separate issues, so I don't.
Well, I mean, they'll be separate, presented separate, but do you want to go back to back is what I'm saying.
Oh, it doesn't matter to me.
Doesn't matter?
Doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Well, just for variety's sake, let's take 239-12, which is Mr. Arasim's first appeal. And you have 15 minutes to make your case.
Mr. Chair, before we begin, may I have a point of clarification, please?
Yes.
Under Article 3 of our rules and regulations, Section 6, subsection F, and I'm directing this to you, Commissioner
Direct it to
Siegel.
the chair, please.
I have read documents that Mr. Siegel has talked with this person on a regular basis and emailed this person. And so under this it says, a commissioner shall withdraw from any proceedings in which he or she has a direct or indirect conflict of interest, or the commissioner does not believe he or she can provide a fair and impartial hearing. Commissioner shall err on the side of caution and withdraw from any proceeding in which there is an appearance of a conflict of interest. I therefore submit that there is an appearance of a conflict of interest.
May I see a copy of these emails? I've never emailed, never done such a thing.
I'll present those, sir, at the January meeting, because I do have those.
Okay,
Under
so
Well, if you have them and you're talking about them, let's see them.
I have them at my house, but thank you.
Oh, isn't that convenient?
just a moment.
Commissioner Stein?
Mr. Harrison, if you could hold your comments, please.
I believe the floor had been given to me, and this gentleman,
Well, the chair gave the floor to Mr. Foster to ask his point of clarification. He is questioning whether there might be a commissioner.
I apologize, I guess I missed.
Okay, you need to stop talking. Commissioner Siegel, do you have something you'd like to say? Mic's turned up.
These have been too loud most of the evening, I believe. I apologize. Can you all hear me? Normal? Yeah. I believe, because I assembled several of my emails for Commissioner Foster's review, I believe there may have been one, I don't have perfect recall of this, email between Mr. Arasim and myself. The important part of this, as I best understand it, is that I should withdraw from any proceeding in which I have a direct or indirect conflict of interest, or if I do not believe I can provide a fair and impartial hearing. I would maintain that I have no conflict of interest, small or large, and that I can provide a fair and impartial hearing. I was careful to disclose that I have on occasion had casual verbal conversations with Mr. Arasim, who a month ago gave us the CPC. We undertook to understand that ourselves. I believe, in fact, irrespective of the vote, that recusal is mine and mine alone, and it's my matter of judgment without the rest of the commission weighing in. I am nevertheless willing to listen to any commissioner that cares to tell me their opinion or has concerns for me.
Can you tell us if you have had any communication with Mr. Arasim about either of these particular cases that will be under review?
No, I have not at all. I had no idea that he was filing these or other cases.
Anyone else?
I'm aware that he's busy and interested in our matters. There's no question about that.
Anyone else have a question for Commissioner Siegel?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I just say, and I don't want to make a point of order, as I recall, this was an issue that was raised last month. There was a vote and it was rejected, and I would suggest that Commissioner Foster is wasting the time of this commission with this, raising this issue repeatedly.
Well, he has the right to ask the question, but the chair rules that Commissioner Siegel will be taken at his word that there has been no contact with Mr. Arasim regarding either of these cases, and that he can be a fair and impartial party in this discussion. Mr. Arasim, 15 minutes.
Before I start, and my time starts, Since Mr. Foster brought up the subject,
I'm sorry, excuse
And-
me, excuse me again, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
What?
I apologize, Mr. Chair. While you were talking with the rest of the commission and starting up with Mr. Harrison, I was having a private colloquy with our attorney. And his opinion to me, which I will undertake to analyze alone, is that there is a requirement that I err on the side of caution. And while I will aver that I've had nothing to say or do with this person about these cases whatsoever, I will err on the side of caution. I will now recuse myself from his case.
Okay, so you can leave
I
the
will
dais,
now
please.
leave the room.
Oh, Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry.
It's very,
Let's try one
it's a
last
very
time.
fluid situation.
Here we go.
Like I was saying before my time starts, since Mr. Foster brought up the subject, and since you allowed him to speak to it, at the last meeting, this came up, as you all just spoke about. And Mr. Foster gave, I believe, at least one of the three of you that spoke up and said that you had spoken to me in passing and this and that and the other. I believe he gave one of the commissioners quite a dressing down.
Okay, let's
Yep.
not
Well,
address Mr. Foster. It's time for your case.
Sir, I have to say this.
Sir, I am aware of this.
Sir, I have to say this, okay?
You are under-
Mr. Foster has also spoken to me.
Your time has begun.
Mr. Foster has also spoken to me, and I believe he is being hypocritical when he did not admit that. And I have two witnesses to those conversations sitting right here, Mr. Delangelo and Ms. Rourke. And I have photographs, sir.
Your time is ticking.
So I believe this gentleman should recuse himself also because he has shown bias towards me. Because he did not admit that he had spoken to me also, just like the rest of the other three commissioners were honest. He didn't, he was dishonest about it. And I believe that shows bias towards me. I have a copy of the statement that I am going to give you right now, and I also have information for you. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make copies for everybody. All right, this is, which case are we talking about?
239.
239, okay, all right. Being that this complaint revolves around an APD vehicle parked for weeks, not traveling in a fire lane within the city of Albuquerque, and that I point to possible violations of fire code law in my original complaint, and that the IRO, Ms. Robin Hammer, states, and I quote, "The independent review office thoroughly and impartially investigated your complaint," and then goes on to say, and I quote, "I, as independent review officer, made findings whether the police officer involved violated standard operating procedure based on the preponderance of evidence." The IRO continues, and I quote, "There was no violation of the law." And then goes on to build upon that by stating, and I quote, "The evidence in this case showed that Lieutenant R had the lawful authority to park the command post in the fire lane because he had obtained the mall and the fire department's permission to do so. Cottonwood Mall is a private property with public access, and there was no violation of the law." I contend that these statements by the RO are at best misleading and at worst an untruth to conceal a frivolous investigation specifically designed to promote a predetermined outcome by the IRO and her investigator, Mr. Paul Scostapol, to artificially tip the scales of the preponderance of evidence in favor of the officer involved, and further designed to protect his superiors by the chief who signed off on this, who failed to supervise the officer's willful, unlawful, and dangerous actions. It is very obvious to me that the investigator and the IRO have no clue as how the private business sector operates. We do not take unnecessary risk. And being that in my provocative tone, not argumentative, on the phone with Lieutenant R, asking him repeatedly who he got permission from, he blurts out, "I decided." He then goes on to say, that was the best place for me to park it. He then backpedals and can't say he talked to anyone in particular at the Albuquerque Fire Department and never once states that the owners of the mall gave him permission. I contend that the fact that the IRO promotes in that Lieutenant R talked to the mall management is most likely false and coached into the lieutenant before he gave his compelled statement, as that statement does not show up in the investigator's report until then. And the investigator made zero attempt to verify that he spoke to the fire department, let alone to the mall management or the mall security. Is there a possible way I can see that timer? I make my statements based upon the investigative report signed by Mr. Skostopol, wherein he lists the evidence he reviewed in this case, showing no evidence that he ever reviewed any Albuquerque fire codes, or spoke to the fire department, or spoke to mall management, or to mall security. And that Mr. Skostopol cherry-picked a state statute that was then manipulated by him and the IRO that is irrelevant, being that it speaks to vehicular travel, which has nothing to do with parking for weeks at a time, or says anything as to exemptions to the fire codes. And a stick your head in the sand with us avoidance of the only question in this case: did Lieutenant R violate Albuquerque Fire Code? The controlling fire code law in this case that the investigator, Mr. Skostopol, and the IRO, Ms. Robin Hammer, ignored with purpose and collusion to promote their predetermined conclusions is the comprehensive 66-page Albuquerque Fire Code established on November 1st, 2012, in accordance with the legislative body, that being the City Council, Bill number 01213, enacted Fire Code Ordinance 2012-029, which reads in part, Section 503, apparatus access roads. Under 503.4, obstruction of fire apparatus access roads, it states, and I quote, fire apparatus access roads and fire lanes shall not be obstructed in any manner, including the parking of vehicles. Section 503 goes on to state, under 503.4.1, stopping or parking in a fire lane, the person in lawful possession of the property, that means the mall owners, who they say gave them permission, shall keep designated fire lines free of vehicles and other obstructions. No exemptions for any APD little vans that they've got. These fire codes carry a hefty monetary fine or jail term and were established to fall in line with the recognized best practices for public safety across the USA, which is my constitutional right under the state constitution. I have an inherent right to safety. They also fall in line with New Mexico state statutes and codes, specifically Section 6678, titled Provisions Uniform Throughout the State, and 6679, titled Powers of Local Authorities. I ask this commission to overturn the forged conclusions of the IRO in this case, with the addition of finding that Lieutenant R and his superiors up to and including Chief Banks, all of them who should know these fire codes, did sign off on this fictitious investigation and did violate APD SOP 11910 I1, as their actions did result in an unfavorable comment and reflect discredit on the department. And I also require that the IRO and find Lieutenant R and those same APD officials in violation of any and all other applicable rules, APD rules, that she and her investigator ignored, but not limited to General Order 1041, compliance with laws, rules, and regulations, where it reads in part, D, personnel shall obey all municipal, county, state, federal, and civil laws. And General Order 1042, special consideration, privilege, professional courtesy, where it reads under A, Albuquerque Police Department personnel will not give special consideration, privilege, or professional courtesy to other Albuquerque Department personnel or personnel from other law enforcement agencies when such personnel are alleged to be involved in a violation of any law. Then we go on to General Order 1044, conduct while on duty, where it reads in part, A, personnel shall consistently direct their best efforts to accomplish the functions of the department intelligently and efficiently. And under part C, personnel shall maintain sufficient competency to properly perform their duties and assume the responsibilities of their positions. I ask that you pass a non-binding resolution as soon as possible, asking for Mr. Scotchapul's and Ms. Hammer's immediate removal for highly possible felonious violations of New Mexico State Statute, Section 1016(3). This commission can no longer be looked at or tolerated being looked at as a laughingstock due to the unskilled and unlawful actions of the IRO, her staff, or APD. I ask that the statement be placed in the record verbatim. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions, Mr. Arasim? I'm sorry, what?
I have copies of the fire code. I have a copy of the signed into law from the city clerk's office when the fire codes were signed into law. If you'd like to look at those, I've got the fire code highlighted for you, and I have a copy of my statement for the record.
Okay. Is there a question? Okay.
I have two questions. Is there any documents from the mall management showing that there was permission given?
Good question. I think you need to ask the investigator.
Did you?
If there were, they did not give them to me. And under the rules of the appeal process, I should have gotten that. If there was such a thing, I should have gotten a copy of it. And that was on December 4th that I was given everything they had, as far as I know. Now, if they didn't give me everything that they had, then I would say that we've got ourselves a problem here.
Did you, by any chance, take a moment to talk to the management in relation to this?
I talked to the mall security, and that information is in the audio tape that was given to the IRO when I filed my complaint. I gave her a copy of the audio tape, and I gave her a copy of video showing where the vehicle was parked and how it was kind of not a really good situation, parked visually blocking a crosswalk where people would be walking back and forth, people with, kids in baby carriages and things like that. Not good situation. And oh, by the way, I went by the mall the other day, and guess where the mobile command center is now? It's parked as far away from the building as you can get it and still be on the property.
Any other questions for Mr. Arasim? Yes, Commissioner Shine.
Just to follow up, when you say fire, is it in a fire lane?
What?
Where you say you go to command center, it's there now.
Today?
Yeah.
No, it's not in the fire lane. It's parked on the mall property, but as far away as you can get from the building as you can and still be on the property. And it has orange cones ringed around it. So it's in the parking lot. No fire lanes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arasim. Is Lieutenant R present to speak?
No.
Okay, so we move down to the Albuquerque Police Department. Representative, you have, Lieutenant Jordan, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This incident occurred December of last year, approximately about the same time we're in. And it's common practice, the Albuquerque Police Department during the holidays.
Can you speak in the microphone?
I'm sorry. It's a common practice during the holidays for area commands to establish what we call the holiday tag plans. These are operations to focus on retail centers during the holiday season because of the uptick in people shopping for Christmas and various holidays that occur this time of the year. What occurs is that a written tag plan is in place, which coordinates with the mall, in this case, and other retailers, where we conduct high visibility operations, which include parking the mobile command posts. And what he's referring to is basically one of our large RV vans that we use. We have those in place there, and on top of other high visibility patrols to deter crime during these incidents, because we do have an increase in shoplifting and other crimes and activity during the holiday seasons. This is an ongoing tag plan that we do at not only Cottonwood, but at Coronado and the other major retail centers every year. As part of the pre-planning for this, we do sit down and meet with the retailers, the owners, the responsible parties for the properties to coordinate where we're going to conduct operations, how we're going to conduct operations, and the type of operations we're going to conduct. So in this case, there was a written tag plan, as there always is for the holidays, and there was permission and coordination with the owners of the property where the command post would have been placed.
Excuse me just a moment, Mr. Arasim. Mr. Arasim, could you please be seated?
Sir, I have
Could you please be seated? It is distracting.
I'm sorry.
Lieutenant Jordan, continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I stated, this is an ongoing, these operations are ongoing. We do this every year for several years for these high visibility patrols. And part of the purpose to have the mobile command post there is to expedite, not only for the visibility aspects of it, to show the public that we are present, but also for the fact to streamline operations. We'll use that to expedite report writing, booking procedures, and that type of activity while this occurs. This ongoing operation is continuing as we speak. Like I said, every year we do this. I'm not sure if they decided if it's according to the gentleman that the command post is not where it was last year, and I don't know the reasons for that, why it was changed. Does the commission have any questions for me at this point, sir?
Mr. Foster.
Lieutenant, you referred to a plan that you submit to the mall. Is that correct, for the holiday or these procedures?
Yes, sir. What we do is before these operations commence, we meet with the various retailers that we will be focusing on. And like I said, it's the larger retail centers throughout the city. This is not, like I said, these operations are occurring all over the city at various retail centers. And we meet with them, coordinate with them. We've got a very good relationship with the business community. Many times they're always requesting us their other events also. So they are aware of what we're doing and what we're going to do. And one thing I also forgot to point out too, that these command posts are always manned. So if there's a situation that if the vehicle had to be moved because there was a situation where fire apparatus or other emergency vehicles had to be placed, the command post can be moved. They're not just parked and left there. There's always somebody occupied. So if an emergency situation erupted where the command post would interfere with something, it can be moved by personnel if it had to be.
Foster, you have a follow-up?
So this plan is presented to the business community, and I'm therefore, and correct me if I'm wrong, assuming that this plan was submitted to mall management?
It would have been coordinated, correct, with mall management, appropriate people at the mall.
Is it a standard departmental procedure as to when this plan is submitted and with whom it was discussed, or was there any signature that verifies that this plan was accepted by the management of the mall?
In this specific case, I have not seen it, the specific plan for this for 2012, but I can tell you from my past experience having run these operations myself, these are done with ongoing meetings, and because this is a plan that we do every year, and the coordination that we have with the mall, that they will be well aware of what we're doing and accept where we place our resources at their facilities.
Anyone else have a question? Mr. Peterson?
Am I allowed to ask a question of Inspector Scutchable?
Not at this moment.
This time?
Commissioner Barella?
I have a question specifically about the vehicle being parked in the fire lane. It's my understanding, did APD discuss that with the Albuquerque Fire Department?
Yes, we coordinate, when we coordinate these larger operations, we coordinate with all the stakeholders. And if the fire department felt that where the location of the command post was going to cause a problem, then we would have taken the appropriate action. And as I also stated before, if something were to occur where, if there was perhaps a large fire incident where they had to place their vehicles in that area, the command post is always manned, so it could have been moved at an instant if needed.
Commissioner Shine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a tactical or law enforcement reason why the vehicle has to be in the fire lane?
The reason is because it'd be close to the building and for the visibility, because most fire lanes are close to entrances to, so that's probably why it was placed there, visibility issues.
Well, I have problems with this particular letter and this language of the letter in terms of citing to the state statute, but I'll raise that with Ms. Hammer. I assume Ms. Hammer addresses this, does she?
That's correct.
But let me say, obviously no one is going to fault the police department for doing what you're doing. The question is whether there's a technical violation here that can be avoided and how it can be avoided so that you can proceed to do whatever you obviously are doing appropriately. And so I don't want you to misunderstand any of my concerns.
I
raised
understand.
with Ms. Hammer in terms of the technical problems. I mean, I obviously support the notion of the police department working with the community on Christmas time.
So just to be clear, your assertion is that the fire department was okay with the placement of your vehicle? or
Correct, sir.
command post? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Jordan. IRO, Ms. Hammer, you have 10 minutes.
In this case, the Albuquerque Police Department parked the mobile command center in a place, as the lieutenant said, after a TACT plan, which is a development of a mission that is approved not only by the lieutenant, it would have been approved by the lieutenant's commander, and the chief of police ultimately signs off on high-profile TACT plans. This plan would include, as they say, meetings of all the stakeholders. Prior to even submitting the TACT plan, Lieutenant R spoke with the Albuquerque Fire Marshal and cleared the plan with the Fire Marshal. And the Fire Marshal approved where the plan was that the vehicle would be approached, and taken into account was the fact that there was room for fire trucks to access the mall at the time, and that it wasn't parked right in front of the door, but it was parked farther down the sidewalk. You may use your common knowledge that Cottonwood Mall has a large curb area around several 100,000 1,000 feet, I don't know, thousands and thousands of feet of curb area. And the curb area of Cottonwood Mall is a fire lane. But the fire marshal approved it, as well as the owner, and the owner, or the owner's representative of the mall approved the plan. The owner's approval ties in not only to the state law, but also the city law, which is corresponding to that traffic laws, including enforcement of fire parking laws on private property, aside from a very few specified offenses such as DWI, domestic violence, there are enumerated, driving while under the influence, there are enumerated traffic offenses that you do not have to have owner's permission to enforce on private property. Short of that, speeding, for instance, cannot be enforced on any private property, but private property which the owner's permission, such as someone who owns a racetrack is not going to want speeding enforced upon the racetrack. There are times in which landowners give permission to the public agencies to enforce traffic laws, which would include parking violations. And in this case, there's a state law that applies, so that the Albuquerque Police Department could enforce state traffic violations at Cottonwood Mall, but there is a city ordinance 8-1-2-3 that tracks the state code, which says that upon application of the owner may give permission to a municipality to enforce traffic laws. That same owner can give permission to have a limited permission, if you will, and that permission would be limited in that those traffic laws would not be enforced against the Albuquerque Police Department. So just as the owner can give permission for enforcing traffic laws on their private property, they can make that permission limited as well. And so in this case, it's a limited permission that was given by Cottonwood Mall representatives, owners representatives, in that that they gave permission for the mobile command center to be in an area which did not obstruct the fire department's purposes, but yet did have red striping next to it. So I would submit that Lieutenant R did speak with the fire marshal and the fire representatives prior to submitting the TAC plan, and as Mr. Aronson says, that he did, at one point in this tape, Lieutenant R does say, I decided, well, what he decided was exactly where to park the van, the motorhome, but that was after consulting with the fire department about what their needs were. And obviously, over a month period of time, the fire department had been in and out of there, would have seen the mobile command center, and certainly didn't voice any concerns at all. So I would submit that you adopt the letter as written.
Okay.
Commissioner Peterson.
I guess I'd like to start by reiterating what Commissioner Shine said and say, I get it. I understand why you do this, I understand why it's there, I understand high visibility areas. I understand crime around Christmas, I get it. The problem is that that's not the complaint. The complaint isn't, whether or not this was a good idea. The complaint was that parking the command post in this location is a violation of the law. I guess the smoking gun for me would be the evidence in this case goes on to show that he had obtained the mall and fire department's permission to do so. If that's the case, could the mall ownership make a statement? Could the fire marshal make a statement to that effect? If it was okay to do that last year, I'm curious why they didn't do it in the same spot this year.
There's no evidence other than his oral statement that that's what they've done this year. We haven't sent anyone out. That wasn't a presentation. And I would submit that it's not against the law. The commander did speak with the mall person. Investigator Scott Schapol did speak with the fire marshal to say yes, they had given their consent. And each and every year, the mall owners, the large mall people, are part of this TAC plan, and they give consent, and it's discussed. It's not something that occurs in the middle of the night. It's a plan, so it is legal. It's not legal for you and me to go do that, But because of all of the parameters that were followed, they got the landowner's permission, they got the fire marshal's permission, and they made sure that the vehicles were not going to obstruct fire lanes or use of fire trucks. That's what makes it legal. There's nothing illegal about it. So I understand that we all want crime to go down, but in this case, not only did we want crime to go down, but they followed the law in order to do it.
Commissioner Shine.
I'm concerned because, first of all, the letter that we signed off on that went out dealt only with the state statute, and that statute only makes reference to the private landowner being able to waive any of the provisions of the rest of the state traffic code. It has nothing to do with the city ordinances. If you look at the city ordinances, and you made reference to one of them, 8.5-1-16, parking prohibited in fire lane reads, "No person shall either stop, stand, or park a vehicle in a marked fire lane or otherwise obstruct such lane, whether such lane is public property or on private property, which is devoted to public use, or on private property which is devoted to public use. Such fire lane shall be marked either with a sign or a red curb." Then 8-5-1-27 goes on to say, "Authorized police and emergency vehicles accepted. Any authorized emergency vehicle being used in an official capacity may stand or park irrespective of any provision of this title, provided a lighted lamp displaying a red light visible under the normal atmospheric conditions from a distance of 500 feet from the vehicle in all directions is displayed during such standing or parking, and further that such standing or parking shall not be for a period longer than necessary." I would suggest that these two provisions would require that you not park a vehicle of the police command center in the fire lane unless its light is lit, if it's got a light, and it's visible for the whole time it's there. And arguably, if it's there for a month, it's the time that's necessary. But I don't know whether that is the practice. The other section, this we had, as you know, we had a conversation about this privately, and you pointed out 8-1-2-3 as in the ordinances, which talks about agreements with local landowners to enforce traffic regulations on their land. And all it says is that if there's such an agreement, the landowner doesn't have to file a plat of the land. It's a land use provision, and unless you have under the language of 8-1-2-3, have you ever gotten or seen or discussed with anybody whether there is such an agreement and what it provides?
I know that there's an agreement between the Cottonwood Mall and the Albuquerque Police Department for enforcement of traffic laws. Otherwise, the Albuquerque Police Department would not be at Cottonwood Mall enforcing traffic laws. Therefore, if they have given their permission, they can give limited permission. And I would respectfully disagree with that. The enforced traffic laws, if I paint a fire lane in the front of my house and I don't give anyone permission, and I can put my kids can park in front of my house, the police are going to come and enforce my kids parking in front of my house with a painted fire lane. You have to have permission to be on private property, period, unless it's one of those enumerated crimes that they have automatic right to. And so if you have to have permission to be on private property, that permission can be limited. And in this case, it was limited in that the mall conceded or acquiesced, agreed that the van, the mobile command center could be where it was parked.
Well, there's no sense in arguing. I disagree.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Ms. Hammer? Mr. Gorilla.
You're talking about the TAC plan in this case. Did you or your office review the actual TAC plan?
We spoke with the lieutenant who described what it was, and we know we've seen TAC plans in the past. So we didn't see the individual TAC plan. We had no reason to doubt the credibility of the lieutenant because there's liability whenever the police go anywhere. And those TAC plans, there are SOPs in which TAC plans are provided under and provide for chain of command approval for TAC plans. And so we had no indication at all that there were any problems with this TAC plan this year and any other year.
So it was the lieutenant, correct?
Uh-huh.
told you that in the TAC plan that he had permission from the mall and also from the fire marshal.
Right, and we confirmed with the fire marshal that he did have permission, and that the fire marshal was part of the TAC plan.
Did you confirm with the mall owner?
I don't believe we've confirmed with the mall owner because of the fact that it is, we talked to the director of security for the mall, and the director of security confirmed that the mall had given permission.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Arasim, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Yes. I will reiterate one more time that the Albuquerque Fire Codes in force at the time, it states that let me find it here. The person in lawful possession of the property shall keep designated fire lanes free of vehicles and other obstructions. There are no exemptions for anything. Fire lanes are to be kept clear of vehicles and other obstructions at all times. I have extreme problems with what you've heard because I believe it needs to be struck from the record. There is no evidence in the investigation that of any TAC plan. There is no evidence in the investigation that the fire department okayed this. There is no evidence in the investigation that the mall owners okayed this. There is no evidence, as Mr. Shine stated, I believe he was talking about some other city ordinances about lights and all those kinds of things on the vehicle park there. But there's no evidence of any of that. But what I'm alluding to as far as striking all of that information from the discussion here tonight is your rules and regulations. Now remember, the IRO has had this case for a year. And under the rules, your rules and regulations, under appeals, section D or paragraph D, it says that under, let me find it here. Under, I don't know how you guys cut this up. It's D4. New evidence which have been brought in, new evidence which could have been put in the record during previous investigations or hearings is not favored for introduction at POC appeal hearings. So in other words, the TAC plan that they're talking about here and any discussions that they had with anybody that is not in the investigative files that I received on December 4th is new evidence, and that is not allowed in these discussions. And I would ask that that be struck from the record. There is no evidence they spoke to any of these people, not the mall management. There is absolutely no way that the mall would agree to such a thing. The liability, the risk, an unnecessary risk, is just, it's insane. When you could park that vehicle, I understand the reason for it, and I commend the fire or the police department for doing what they're doing. I understand totally, but they cannot obstruct a fire lane. That is against the law. That vehicle could have been easily parked 30, 40 feet to the east and take up a few parking spaces, as it is now, only they put it in a different location, completely different location, away from the main entrance of the mall, where you have people milling around, people pushing around babies and baby carriages, cars going back and forth. This thing was a serious obstruction. And I'm glad nobody got hurt, and my understanding is that this is common practice. They've been doing this for years. I wasn't able to find the previous fire code. It was established in 2005, but I can't imagine that it was much different in this aspect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arasim. I will point out that, do you have a question for Mr. Arasim?
I have a question for,
Okay, you may sit down, Mr. Arasim. You have permission, question for Ms. Hammer.
Ms. Hammer, is this actually new information that has been brought, or is this information that has been previously looked at prior to this appeal?
The letter clearly states that the lieutenant obtained permission from the landowner, or from the mall, and from the fire department. That's contained in the letter. There's nothing new about that. The TAC plan portion of it, I haven't had a chance since that's the first time I looked at that, but the TAC plan is part of the evidence in that it was gathered from the interview with the lieutenant. So there's nothing new about it.
And D4 also says that new evidence which clarifies evidence already in the record may be allowed.
IRO?
Ms. Hammer. Mr. Arasim, you may sit down.
So I guess I'm missing this, but what you're saying that our investigator looked at records that either was a TAC plan or was referring to some type of plan that was looked at by the management and there was concurrence.
Right. The mall agreed, and there is a plan which was approved by the chain of command.
And to follow up on that, because Mr. Erickson was saying that there appears to be no document that shows that the fire marshal nor the mall management approved that. So what do we have in our documents that show that?
The letter says, with the interview with Lieutenant R, he said before parking the command post there, he obtained permission from the Albuquerque Fire Department to do so. He also received the approval from Cottonwood Mall Management, who is an own agent for the owner of the property, and that was part of the TAC plan. And that's in the letter.
Thank you.
Okay, just to remind us, in our rules, it states that under an appeal, the POC may modify or change the findings of the IRO. The POC may make further recommendations to the chief regarding the findings and any discipline imposed or proposed by the chief. I guess the procedure.
Have a motion on the floor to uphold the.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Shine?
Mr. Chair, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to remand this matter to the IRO because I think the letter is inadequate.
In what way?
I'm about to indicate.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Inadequate because it does not deal at all with the city ordinance. It does not deal at all with the provisions of the fire code. It deals inadequately with the question of who has the right to waive, if anybody, has the right to waive the parking requirements in terms of the fire lane on private property. And it may be that all of that can be straightened out, but it's not clear at all to me from the letter, and the letter does not adequately, the only thing it cites for authority is a state statute which is only partially applicable. It doesn't deal with the city ordinance or the fire code. And therefore, I think maybe it can be clarified, and the result is absolutely right. And even if the result is wrong in the sense that it is a technical violation of parking, I do not by any means suggest that this lieutenant should be disciplined or in any way, found, because it's a practice that's going on for years in the department. But it may be a technical violation that could be clarified through a number of ways and just to eliminate the problem. But as far as this appeal is concerned and this letter is concerned, I believe this letter is inadequate. It doesn't deal with all the issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second to the motion? Commissioner Barker seconds. Is there discussion? Commissioner Boston.
But the issue in front of us, as Mr. Erickson has pointed out, is there a violation of law or is there not a violation of law? Period.
Mr. Chair, may I address?
Yes, Ms. Hammer.
I would just submit that under the rules, that the POC may modify or change the findings of the IRO. There seems to be no provision for remanding.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I explain my motion before you rule? I'm not asking for a remand just to do an investigation. I'm asking for a remand to modify the letter.
Okay, what our counsel just advised me we could do would be to accept these references to the city code that you were referring to as new evidence that would support the letter, that would support the findings of the IRO, or maybe deny the findings of the IRO, however you see them.
Well,
But there's no provision in the rules for remanding the letter back to the IRO.
I will modify it. I can certainly do this. It seems to me it's consistent with the rule that you just read. I would move to remand the letter to the IRO so that she can modify the letter to incorporate these other issues and deal with these other issues. We're not going to sit up here and rewrite the letter ourselves, obviously, and that's not contemplated by the rule.
So I guess we either, I'm blanking on terminology tonight, uphold the appeal or uphold the letter, or deny the appeal, I guess, is the uphold the appeal or deny the appeal. And then we can ask the additional language to be included in the final letter or not. Or I guess the letter has already been written and this is,
Yes,
I guess so.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, Kevin Kern, City Attorney's Office. As Ms. Hammer has explained, there's no provision in the rules to remand the case or the letter to the IRO. Unfortunately, you're left with the decision of either approving, or as the chair has explained, either upholding the appeal or denying the appeal. The additional evidence in the form of the city ordinances are not in the record. Therefore, I would therefore advise you not to make that part of the POC's decision. Your decision has to be on the record, and those authorities, that ordinance is not in the record. I don't know that I've shed any light on the issue or helped at all, but that's how I see it.
Mr. Chair.
So, what we need to do is vote to, based on the letter that has been written and the appeal that has been made, we are going to vote to either uphold the appeal or deny the appeal. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Your motion, I think, was out of order.
I'm going to make another motion.
Either to uphold or deny the appeal.
Yes.
Okay,
May I first ask a question of our counsel?
sure.
Why, if the ordinance is part of the law, why can we not take notice of it? Why does it have to formally be put into the record? Just like the statutes, the federal government, and everybody else is public notice.
Well, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I don't think this body has the authority to take judicial notice. I think the evidence has to be on the record.
And Mr. Chair, I move to grant the appeal and to reject the letter.
Okay, is there a second? Commissioner Barella seconds. Is there discussion? I personally would vote against the motion because I believe that the evidence supports that there was a plan, that the police had the authority and the approval of the fire department to proceed and to conduct their business as they did. Any other discussion? Okay, are we ready to vote? On Commissioner Foster,
I apologize, it's getting to be.
please ask your question.
Clarification, Commissioner Shine, are you saying in your motion that you are, could you clarify it for me one more time, please?
Mr. Chair, I will not address Commissioner Foster. It's inappropriate under Robert's rules.
Okay.
Perhaps the chair could restate the motion.
The motion before us is to uphold the appeal of Mr. Arasim on 239-12. Is there any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion to uphold the appeal, please raise your right hand. Okay, that is 4 in favor. All opposed? Me and Commissioner Foster are opposed. All right. Thank you, Mr. Curran, for your assistance. Let's see if I can get back to my... Okay, so now we move to 236-12, Mr. Paul Hernandez comes to appeal his letter. Mr. Hernandez, are you here? Okay, Mr. Arasim, CPC 259-12.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Out of respect to the process, I will again err on the side of caution and recuse myself at this time from this appeal.
Thank you. Ms. Francis, are you ready? Mr. Arasim, you have 15 minutes to present your case regarding the citizen complaint 259-12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Check. Okay. Once again, I would ask that Commissioner Foster also err on the side of caution and recuse himself from this case. Saying that, I will go ahead, because obviously he's not going to do that. Do you all have the investigative file on this? You do? Could I bring your attention to, in that investigative file, there is I believe he's called it a investigative note by the investigator, Chris Davidson. Excuse me?
What's the page number, Bob?
I have no idea. My page numbers are all different than yours. There's, in his investigative file, there's an investigative note. It's 2 paragraphs. And it concerns another CPC. I can read it to you if you like. Mine was like page 6 or something.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, investigative note.
Okay. If you take a look, in the information packet that the independent review officer, Ms. Robin Hammer, sent me, you will find this investigative note by investigator Chris Davidson. I don't know quite how I should handle this, but I won't say the CPC number. How's that? The investigative note says this case also coincided with CPC such and such, in which such and such complained of a marked Albuquerque police vehicle not having a government plate or temporary tag displayed. In that case, the findings of Mr. Such and such were corrected that state law requires all vehicles must display a license plate or a temporary tag. There is no exemption for police or emergency vehicles under the law. State Statute 6318 requires that every vehicle operated on the highways of the state shall have a license plate or valid temporary tag displayed. It is against the law to display a temporary tag that has expired. And in the second paragraph, it says, however, in this case, Police Department General Order 119.9 states all department vehicles except SID must have a G plate. SID refers to Special Investigations Division, I suppose, which consists of narcotics and burglary and all that. Also, Albuquerque Police Order 119.10 states all personnel driving marked or unmarked department vehicles will have an assigned government plate properly affixed to their vehicles at all times, with the only exception for undercover units such as SID, Vice, Narcs, Intel, such as that. I must say I'm astonished at the thinking displayed by the investigator, Chris Davidson, and then promoted by the RO, Ms. Robin Hammer, who is a licensed New Mexico attorney. So much so that it deeply concerns me is that obviously they are both suffering from delusion that has clouded their objective cognitive abilities to a point that they actually believe Albuquerque Police Department orders usurp state law. APD SOPs, general orders, chief special orders, and policies and procedures are not law, never have been, and never will be. I contend that Chief Banks, the IROs, and the investigators' application of these orders 119.9's B and 119.10U are bogus, as these orders never claim to give approval of driving an undercover car without a tag of some sort. All they say is that they don't need a G tag or that it be properly affixed, as the investigator clearly states in his report. Another apparent prime example of this poor application of department rules, it gives the appearance of this being a systematic problem within APD, is where they fail to abide by the law in the city of Albuquerque because of APD's collective idiocy, paid out a large sum of taxpayer dollars for violating the civil rights of people when they were illegally detained as innocent witnesses to crimes. We all heard about that recently. I am sure that APD must have, like other police departments across the nation, a system of supplying license plates for undercover cars that is, as it should be, closely guarded. If they don't, then their only excuse must be that they are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on boondoggles such as the Real-Time Crime Center. It appears that the lack of common sense at APD has infiltrated the IRO staff and permeated the IRO's mind to think for one moment that a vehicle could be driven around on the public streets without any way to identify it. It is best asinine and at worst insane. And in this particular case, that it would be justified when this supposedly cloaked SID vehicle was parked by Officer B in broad daylight at the APD headquarters in the police car parking only section on 4th Street that day. And not in the city's underground parking garage, not more than a half a block away. Due to Officer B's laziness and disrespect for not only the law, but also the driving public at large, the value of that brand new undercover car is most likely gone. And I say driving public due to the fact that anyone seeing that car without any identifying tag would no doubt be a distraction that could result in them having an accident. Commissioners, I ask you to take a hard look at the narrative of my original complaint and overturn the obviously incomplete and incompetent conclusions made by the investigator, Mr. Davidson, and the IRO, Ms. Hammer, in this case. And I also ask you, but not limited to, you look at all the APD rules that were spelled out for them in my complaint for violations all the way up the chain of command of the officer in question here. Again, in closing, I ask that the Commission pass a non-binding resolution as soon as possible, demanding the immediate resignation of the IRO and the investigator, Mr. Davidson, for highly possible felonious violations of New Mexico State Statute 1016-3 by their failures to perform the duties of their offices that they both have blatantly shown their bias in favor of APD by ignoring the concrete evidence right under their noses, contrary to their predetermined exoneration of Officer B and his superiors at APD in this case. This Commission can no longer tolerate being looked at as a laughingstock due to the unskilled and unlawful actions of the IRO, her staff, or APD. And once again, I ask that this statement be placed in the record verbatim. Thank you.
Is there any question for Mr. Arasim? Commissioner Shine.
It's not a question, it's just a statement. Mr. Arasim, you make it very difficult for us to respond to your appeal when you make the kind of ad hominem, unnecessary attacks that you do on everybody involved in this process. And I just, it's your right, you want to do it that way, but I'm just telling you that for me personally, you make it very, very difficult, sir.
I understand, sir. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. You may sit.
Thank you.
Is Detective B here?
No.
Okay, then we'll move to Lieutenant Jordan, the APD. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. It's common law enforcement practice for while officers are in an undercover capacity involved in undercover operations to actually technically break the law. And what I mean by that is we have officers that will attempt to procure prostitutes. We will have officers that will sell drugs. We will have officers that will try to buy or sell illegal weapons in the course of their investigations and normal operations. In the course of these undercover operations, they may also have to drive vehicles illegally without having a license plate displayed. These are normal operations. We do as SOPs that cover this. In this case, too, this was also a new vehicle that had just been assigned to the fleet and had not been used in an undercover capacity yet, but was going to be used in undercover capacity. So as I stated before, this is a common law enforcement practice to conduct these operations and to, when we have to, violate the law in those sense. We don't prosecute the officers, for instance, while they're engaging in a prostitution operation or a narcotics operation for those type of activities. These are best practices that are done by agencies all over the country, not just in APD. Now I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Commissioner Shine.
I agree with you fully that under many circumstances, officers have to engage in conduct which is engaged in by a citizen in a crime, like buying narcotics or whatever. The question, though, is in terms of this issue, a temporary license plate. Let me ask it this way: are the undercover vehicles that the police generally, the undercover vehicles the police department uses, do they not have some kind of tag? Not a government tag, obviously. It would be ridiculous to have an undercover vehicle with a government tag.
Yes.
But do they have?
All of our vehicles, if they are fully marked units.
No, I'm not talking fully marked.
Let me finish my answer, sir. All of our vehicles, from fully marked vehicles to the unmarked vehicles, to the undercover vehicles, have some type of registration or plate assigned with them. So, yes.
Okay, and obviously you can perform an undercover operation, except perhaps in very unusual circumstances, with some kind of plate on it. It's not going to be a government plate, but it'll be some kind of plate on the vehicle, right?
Depending on the circumstances and the type of operations we are conducting.
So my concern here is the temporary tag. And we had another CPC today that involved temporary tags, in which a marked vehicle, as you're probably aware, a marked vehicle didn't have a temporary tag. And it was a problem because the tags were expiring in 30 days before the Department of Motor Vehicles, because they're backlogged, can get the regular tags out to the police department. And as a result, the police department worked out a procedure whereby the temporary tags can be extended by the police department itself, and for another 90 days or something like that. You're familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here, it may be the problem was that the temporary tag was expired and they were still waiting for the Department of Motor Vehicles, but the answer is not that they don't have shouldn't be a temporary tag on it, not that it's undercover, it's that there's a procedure now in effect to eliminate this problem with the police department issuing temporary tags that are longer in duration. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know if it's appropriate to answer, since that's also a pending CPC that's coming up later in the hearings that you're referring to.
Oh, I'm sorry. We haven't done the CPCs yet. Okay. Well, let me put it this way then. Is it not fair to say that even though this is an undercover car, ordinarily it should have a temporary tag and eventually will have a regular plate on it? Is that a fair statement?
As I stated before, sometimes we put the tags on the vehicles in operations, and sometimes we don't, depending on what activities that are taking place at the time.
Do you know whether this vehicle in particular was one that wasn't supposed to have a tag on it, or shouldn't have a tag on it? What do you know?
I don't know, sir.
Thank you very much.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Lieutenant. You stated that you have SOPs that cover this type of situation. Is there an SOP that covers the situation?
Reference to 1-19-9 that talks about the plate that they're not required to have the government plates. And we've interpreted that as plates.
1-19-9 states all government vehicles must have a G plate. All right?
Yes, it does, sir.
Commissioner Shine.
So what we're not talking, the reason I don't believe that even applies here is because we're not talking about a G plate that's supposed to be on this car, right? If anything, because it's an undercover car, it would be an ordinary plate, not a government plate.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Move to Ms. Hammer.
Thank you.
10 minutes.
Both under New Mexico Supreme Court law and U.S. Supreme Court and 10th Circuit law, on all three of those, the law of the land, it is well established that undercover operations are exempt from the law. In the 10th Circuit, United States versus Mosley, citing U.S. Supreme Court law, the 10th Circuit held that government agents often need to play the role of criminals in order to apprehend criminals. And this role occasionally entails unseemly behavior. Wide latitude is accorded to the government to determine how best to fight crime, citing a U.S. Supreme Court case. New Mexico Supreme Court in State versus Vallejos also held that the police are permitted to play the role of criminals in order to apprehend criminals, participating in a crime they are investigating, or using deception to gain the confidence of suspects. It's well established that while in undercover operations, they can violate the law. There are due process limitations so that the outrageous conduct is not permitted, and there are standards for that. But what we have here is a case of an officer who was working undercover, and as undercover, he had a vehicle which did not have a license plate. And the officer told that to Mr. Aronson even, that as an undercover officer, there are exceptions of the law that that he did not have to apply, that he was exempt from. And one of those things is that he was permitted to drive a car without a license plate in order to further his undercover activities. The SOP that was cited talks about G plates are required with the exception of cases that are for cars that are undercover. That's why it was cited. So this car would never have a G plate, but the law also permits this car to have no plate. So there was no violation of the SOP, which is what we look at, and there certainly was no violation of the law, because as an undercover officer, this officer would be permitted to buy cocaine, and he would be permitted to drive a car without a license plate if it were part of his undercover operation. And this officer was an undercover officer, explained that to Mr. Aronson when Mr. Aronson confronted him, and it was videotaped that was the officer. That's what the officer's operation was that he was undercover, and that was the reason why he didn't have a license plate. So I'm asking you to deny the appeal and uphold the letter.
Is there questions for Ms. Hammer? Mr. Shine?
Ms. Hammer, you're not suggesting that because someone's acting undercover, they can commit any criminal offense?
There are limits. And
That's
the
all I'm
limits,
asking.
I'm just saying there are limits of standards which are set forth by the Supreme Court of both the United States and New Mexico.
And in fact, this car had a temporary tag on it, did it not, at one point? Did it later expire? That's why it had the tag in the glove compartment?
That's why he put it away, yes, he did.
Because it expired, right?
Well, that was one reason. He could have had other reasons.
All I know is in the record. What's in the record is he put it in the glove compartment because it expired. Isn't that what's in the record?
What's in the record is a question of, is it a violation of the law? And I'm saying that it's not a violation of the law.
Ma'am, ma'am, what's in the record is because this car should have had a temporary plate, and the reason it didn't have a temporary plate is because of a problem with the bureaucracy and the Department of Motor Vehicles, not with this officer. So he should certainly not be held responsible for it, but we do have to be straightforward in how we deal with the problem.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Shine, perhaps it's believed that the appropriate SOP is follow the law. We can modify the letter to include the SOP in addition to or in lieu of follow the law, because that's what this officer did. That's what the officer's statement was to Mr. Aronson when asked, why don't you have a plate? He says, I'm exempt because I am working undercover. That's in the record, and that's what was appropriate in this case, in that there are other facts in other cases which have to do with license plates. I stipulate to that. But in this case, we're looking at, did this officer have a lawful authority to drive a car without a license plate? Under the New Mexico Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court, he clearly does.
Are there other questions? Any other commissioners? Okay, I will entertain a motion. Oh, no, wait a minute. We're not there yet. We need to hear a rebuttal. Mr. Arasim, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see nothing in the record that there was any claim that officer was in an undercover operation at the time. And once again, the vehicle was parked in a police-only parking spot, clearly marked for police vehicles only, right next to APD headquarters. So I cannot believe that he was using that vehicle in an undercover operation at the time. So is this something that they can do all the time? And what if they're, I assume they drive these vehicles home or whatever, I'm not sure, but what if they're, say, just going to lunch during an undercover operation, and they've left that scene and they're simply going to lunch? What if they have a little fender bender with somebody and just drive away? What is that person supposed to do to identify that vehicle? Once again, the state law says there's no exemption for police vehicles or emergency vehicles under the law. I'm at a loss here. There's just too many issues with all of this. You simply cannot be driving a vehicle without some sort of identification on it for the driving public to identify that vehicle. If it was speeding, if it cut somebody off, ran a guy on a motorcycle off the road, like I had happened to me about 4 years ago, the same situation. So I'm afraid this just doesn't make any sense. There needs to be a tightening up of the rules. And the law says what it says, as it was at this time of the situation, and I see nothing in the evidence that this officer was in an undercover operation at the time. So, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion on the floor? Is anyone ready to make a motion? Mr. Barker?
I move that you accept the letter as submitted.
So you move, we deny the letter, deny the appeal and uphold the letter.
Deny the appeal, uphold the letter.
And Commissioner Foster, you second that? Now, is there discussion? Commissioner Barella?
I just want to say that I'm going to vote against this motion, and I agree with Commissioner Shine. It's very clear in the letter that we were given that the detective stated he removed the temporary tag because it was expired, not because he was in an undercover capacity.
Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Shine?
Yeah, I'm also going to vote against the motion because I think the rationale is a fictitious one. That it was an undercover operation. I think it was just a bureaucratic screw-up, and that it should be dealt with up front as that.
Any other comments? Okay, ready to vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Okay, 3, and all against? Okay, so the process now, it goes to the Chief Administrative Officer, is that correct?
And the rules provide in the case of a tie, the IRO's letter stands.
Okay. Anybody find the rule? Okay. If the POC votes on the appeal into the tie, the findings of the IRO remain the final findings. That is, according to our rules, it's D, no, I'm sorry. It's section 6J. denied, and the letter stands. All right, been requested we take a short break. Let's take 5 minutes.